excited to get into some church history today in Acts
hmm
chapter 7.
Yeah, it's a monologue from Stephen that we are going to be hearing, and like Tina was saying, he is going to go through the Jewish history to make a point, and we can imagine what the religious leaders are going to think about it.
Yes, if you know how this chapter ends, you know how they feel about it.
Right.
But absolutely, he is going to make a point,
Mm-hmm.
and it's great too. I mean, obviously, he had a point to talk about it, or why he was going to talk about it, and so this is all very important. But it's also kind of cool because you can take what he said, you can compare it to the Old Testament, and you can see how they match up. So it's like another confirmation of what happened in the Old Testament laying here in the New Testament. So this is always important, that church history lines up,
Mm-hmm.
and it does line up. So
And we have Paul. Hello, Paul.
hey, Paul.
Hi, Karen is joining us as well. Good to see you. Good to see you. And it
Hello.
looks like John's here, but he hasn't said hi to us yet.
Okay. Hi, John.
Hi, John.
And we might have some people on Facebook too. So wherever you're watching us, we have our own live server on live.exclaimed.org, or we are on Facebook, of course, under our own page. So Bible Discovery. So wherever you're watching us, we're just glad that you're here, and we've got a lot to get through. So
Yeah, we have over 60 verses, I think, or right around 60. So we are going to jump into it.
I am so glad that Jen is reading today. Jen, if your mouth falls off or if you get all tongue to, I can be your backup, but this is a lot. So
It'll be good. It'll be good.
it'll be great.
Alrighty, so we're going to start off in Acts 7, verse 1. Then the high priest asked Stephen, "Are these accusations true?" This was Stephen's reply: "Brothers and honorable fathers, listen to me. Our glorious God appeared to our ancestor Abraham in Mesopotamia before he moved to Haran. God told him, 'Leave your native land and your relatives and come to the land that I will show you.' So Abraham left the land of the Chaldeans, sure, and lived in Haran until his father died. Then God brought him here to the land where you live now. But God gave him no inheritance here, not even 1 square foot of land. God did promise, however, that eventually the whole country would belong to Abraham and his descendants, though he had no children yet. But God also told him that his descendants would live in a foreign country, where they would be mistreated as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, God told him, and in the end they will come out and worship me in this place. God also gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision at that time. And so Isaac, Abraham's son, was circumcised when he was 8 days old. Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of the 12 patriarchs of the Jewish nation. These sons of Jacob were very jealous of their brother Joseph, and they sold him to be a slave in Egypt. But God was with him. Is that where I was stopping?
Yeah, that sounds good. So, so just like Jen was saying before, this is a monologue, and it starts right there in verse 2, and it's like, here's what Stephen says. And so, if you look back to verse 6, to chapter 6, sorry, we know that Stephen was picked as one of these 7, and he made some people mad, and they started lying on him. And then next thing you know, there was kind of I don't know if it was a trial, but they definitely, they took him aside and they said, hey, what everybody's saying is this and that, and we don't think that you're being a good leader or whatever. And there was all sorts of accusations, which were lies, but that's where we pick up. And then here in chapter 7, they're like, So, you know,
What do you have to say for yourself?
that's
Yeah,
it. You're on
basically.
trial, basically. And so it's kind of interesting because obviously, if you're on trial and you're like, well, in the beginning of time,
I know.
it's
I know.
but like I said previously, it is powerful that he did go through this because we do have like this confirmation in the New Testament about the Old Testament, and we will see where he's going eventually. But he is teaching a history lesson to men that I think already know this history, but he definitely is going down through it. And John says hello, and hey, Miss Sherry's here.
Hi.
Hey, Sherry. We are studying Acts chapter 7. The stoning of Stephen is where it ends up. But first, Stephen is giving us a history lesson, or maybe it's a sermon. I don't know.
Yeah, I think. I think he's bringing up points in the history to explain or try to get the religious leaders to look at themselves.
Absolutely, because if there's one thing that the Jewish nation was really good at was running away from God and being ornery and not being obedient. You know, faith leads to obedience, and so this is so very important. But the history of the Jewish nation is not always one of great obedience, and so obviously I'm sure we all kind of sit and go, oh, they were the worst. Like, I would never do that. But I think Stephen is pointing out, or he's about to point out, yeah, maybe you would.
Yeah, in the commentary when it's talking about the covenant with circumcision, I found this interesting what the commentary had to say. It says circumcision was a sign of the promise or covenant God made with Abraham and the entire nation of Israel. Because Stephen summarized Israel's history, he told how this covenant fared during that time. Stephen pointed out that God always had kept his side of the promise, but Israel had failed again and again to uphold its end. Although the Jews in Stephen's day still circumcised their baby boys, they failed to obey God. The people's hearts were far from God. Their lack of faith and lack of obedience shows that they had failed to keep this part of the covenant. So I thought that was interesting. So that's where he starts the whole, like,
his point. Yeah.
You think you're so, you're so pious, but
you think you're so different than your ancestors, but
yeah.
Hey, Diane is here too. Hi, Diane Clark. Hello. Sorry, I was trying to she was speaking. She was talking about that, and I was trying to find the mouse. Do you ever lose that little arrow? Yeah, we have like a number of different screens in front of us, and the mouse arrow was on one of them, and it just took me a minute. Sorry. I was lucky I wasn't going, like sticking my tongue, doing the thinking face, like, where is it? Anyway, well, I am intrigued. I wonder what's going to happen now.
I don't know. I'm going to go back and read verse 9 because 10 is a continuation of 9, just so that it makes sense. So it says so we're starting again in Acts 7, verse 9. These sons of Jacob were very jealous of their brother Joseph, and they sold him to be a slave in Egypt. But God was with him and delivered him from his anguish, and God gave him favor before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. God also gave Joseph unusual wisdom, so that Pharaoh appointed him governor over all of Egypt and put him in charge of all the affairs of the palace. I think that's where I was supposed to stop originally.
Got it. That makes sense, but
that's okay.
That's okay. So yeah, so there we are. We've gone through Abraham. Now we're going to talk about Joseph. And then we're going to talk about Moses. So it just
keeps going.
Just hold on for the ride. This is good stuff. You might recognize the storyline, but I think that's exactly what Stephen wants.
Okay, we'll pick up in verse 11. But a famine came upon Egypt and Canaan, There was great misery for our ancestors as they ran out of food. Jacob heard that there was still grain in Egypt, so he sent his sons to buy some. The second time they went, Joseph revealed his identity to his brothers, and they were introduced to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent for his father, Jacob, and all his relatives to come to Egypt, 75 persons in all. So Jacob went to Egypt. He died there, as did all his sons. All of them were taken to Shechem, and buried in the tomb Abraham had bought from the sons of Hamor and Shechem. Does that sound good?
Shechem, something like yeah.
Shechem?
Fill in the blank. You see it. Follow along, people. Follow along.
Okay. As the time drew near when God would fulfill his promise to Abraham, the number of our people in Egypt greatly increased. But then a new king came to the throne of Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph. This king plotted against our people and forced parents to abandon their newborn babies so they would die. At that time, Moses was born, a beautiful child in God's eyes. His parents cared for him at home for 3 months. When at last they had to abandon him, Pharaoh's daughter found him and raised him as her own son. Moses was taught all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he became mighty in both speech and action. One day, when he was 40 years old, he decided to visit his relatives, the people of Israel. During this visit, he saw an Egyptian mistreating a man of Israel, so Moses came to his defense and avenged him, killing the Egyptian. Moses assumed his brothers would realize that God had sent him to rescue them, but they didn't. The next day he visited them again and saw 2 men of Israel fighting. He tried to be a peacemaker. "Men," he said, "you are brothers. Why are you hurting each other?" But the man in the wrong pushed Moses aside and told him to mind his own business. "Who made you a ruler and judge over us?" he asked. "Are you going to kill me as you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses heard that, he fled the country and lived as a foreigner in the land of Midian, where his 2 sons were born.
Yeah, so here we are. This is obviously you're recognizing this story, but there's some confirmations in here. We definitely see that Pharaoh's daughter took him and nurtured him as her own, and so that means that he could have been the next Pharaoh, that he would have definite rule and power in that land. But it also is interesting to me that and remember that the Egyptians had all kinds of knowledge, and maybe you can even maybe you can chat and type what you know about the the education of the Egyptians. So I think the first thing that pops to my mind are the pyramids.
Yeah.
And we still really don't know how they built them. And they just say it was aliens, but I don't think I don't think that was the case. But yeah, so they're amazing architects and engineers. But we also know that they were amazing scientists, and so their embalming techniques they're still completely outrageous, and even the tombs where these mummies were buried, the colors that were put on the wall and the colors for decoration, those colors remain today, and that's pretty amazing in and of itself. Some of the other things is that they were definitely great with language and all of that stuff, but they knew amazing mathematicians. They knew how far the earth was from the sun, and so and that's been proven. They actually had like a university of the sun, is kind of what it was called. And so these people, I think that the education that they had, the intellect that they had back then is still a marvel to us today. And so here's Moses. Moses has been trained in all of this. Like, he does not lack for any knowledge because he is being trained by insanely smart people. And so here he is, he's 40 years old, but isn't it interesting that with all of that knowledge, with all that power, with all that money, let's be honest, he's got everything in his fingertips, he is not ready to be a leader for God's kingdom. At 40 years old, he's not ready. And it's going to take more training. And so here we see him, he handled it incorrectly. He struck down and killed a guard that was attacking, his people. Of course, he knew that he was a Hebrew. That had come out at some point. And so it's just very interesting that he had everything at his fingertips, all of the everything. And yet God was like, you're not ready. You're not ready. In fact, I'm going to have to send you to Midian, and you're going to have to live as, basically a pauper, as just a worker for another 40 years. And then we can talk about you being ready, to free my people and to be a leader. So I don't know what that means to you. And I'm not saying that you're not ready to be a leader, but I'm just saying, that we need God, obviously, to be the most competent leader that we can be in any scenario. Moses had a big job. He had to literally release the nation, of Israel. He had to release the Hebrew people there. Well, they weren't the nation of Israel yet. The Hebrews, he had to get them out of Egypt. And so he had a big job on his plate, but only 40 years with everything at his disposal was not enough. God needed him to be trained in additional things.
Yeah, and possibly too, maybe Moses needed 40 years to unlearn what he had learned.
And that. How often is that true about us?
Well, if he was raised as an Egyptian. Mm-hmm. He was not raised as a Jewish man.
That's right.
And so maybe God needed him to unlearn being an Egyptian, and to learn the history and to learn the culture and
maybe not, I'm not saying he was a spoiled brat, but I think we know
he had to be humbled.
Yeah, maybe he needed to learn the value of hard work and the value, not saying that, rich rulers don't work hard, but having nothing and living as an alien, because that's what it says. It says he lived as an alien. So anyway, just kind of interesting. Those are just kind of comments about Moses's life, not necessarily what Stephen's saying, but here we are. Stephen is still, he's in this diatribe mode. He's like, let me tell you about something else. But he's making a point, and he's not making a point yet, but he's still going, and so
he's going to get there eventually.
He's going to get there. He might be long-winded, but that's okay. We're learning good stuff from him.
So we are going to pick back up in verse 30 of Acts 7. 40 years later, in the desert near Mount Sinai, an angel appeared to Moses in the flame of a burning bush. Moses saw it and wondered what it was. As he went to see, the voice of the Lord called out to him, I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses shook with terror and dared not look. And the Lord said to him, Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. You can be sure that I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries, so I have come to rescue them. Now go, for I will send you to Egypt. And so God sent back the same man his people had previously rejected by demanding, Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Through an angel who appeared to him in the burning bush, Moses was sent to be their ruler and savior. And by means of many miraculous signs and wonders, he led them out of Egypt, through the Red Sea, and back and forth through the wilderness for 40 years. Moses himself told the people of Israel, God will raise up a prophet like me from among your own people. Moses was with the assembly of God's people in the wilderness. He was the mediator between the people of Israel and the angel who gave him life-giving words on Mount Sinai to pass on to us. But our ancestors rejected Moses and wanted to return to Egypt. They told Aaron, "Make us some gods who can lead us, for we don't know what has become of this Moses who brought us out of Egypt." So they made an idol shaped like a calf, and they sacrificed to it and rejoiced in this thing they had made. Then God turned away from them and gave them up to serve the sun, moon, and stars as their gods. In the book of the prophets it is written, "Was it to me you were bringing sacrifices during those 40 years in the wilderness, Israel?" No, your real interest was in your pagan gods, the shrine of Molech,
Yeah.
the star of Rephan,
Mhm.
and the images you made to worship them. So I will send you into captivity far away in Babylon. Whoops.
Yeah. So you can see this pattern going on, but obviously we see that Moses had to go live as an alien. Absolutely, there in verse 29, alien in the land of Midian. And the only thing that I think is a little strange, or just a detail that maybe I haven't noticed before, is that in verse 30 it says that an angel appeared to him
Yeah.
in the bush.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says that sorry, where does it say about he was on the mountaintop? I lost it.
I can't see it. Oh, here it is. Through the angel who appeared, it's 35.
35.
And so God sent back.
Yeah. Oh, the
the
angel
same man.
appeared to him in a thorn bush. And so, yeah, it's, in the Old Testament, angels were doing these ministries. And so, these angels appeared and did these things. And so that's kind of interesting. I don't know in the Old Testament that it necessarily says.
No, in the commentary it talked about it. It said from Galatians 3:19 and Hebrews 2:2, it appears that God had given the law to Moses through angels. In Exodus 31:18, it says God wrote the 10 Commandments himself, written by the finger of God. Apparently, God used angelic messengers as mediators to deliver his law to Moses.
Yeah.
Is what it had mentioned.
I found it. It's verse 38. It says,
38.
well, also, but what
Yeah.
you were saying, but it says about the burning bush was an angel, but then in 38 it says the congregation in the wilderness together with the angel who was speaking to him on Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments. And so, the only thing I can surmise in my little human brain is that, God is a spirit. And so it's super hard to have a conversation sometimes with, obviously we can hear God's voice, but like your commentary said, using that angel as a as a communication tool. Of course it was God. Of course it was God's direction and God's words, but using the angel. So anyway, I don't know if that stuck out to you. That stuck out to me, and it was like, oh wait. I thought it was God in the burning bush. I thought it was God on Mount Sinai, and I'm sure that God was there. But it's just interesting to hear that Stephen talks about an angel being there as well. So, and we know angels obviously are messengers, and they are used by God. So there we are. We've got through Moses now, and we're coming down to. We're coming down. Well, it's still Moses. We haven't quite figured it all out yet, but yeah. So so what do you think about what he's talking about? And maybe, like we said, you understand the point is that he's talking about how the Jewish nation continued to just make blunder after blunder, turn away from God. It seems crazy to me that that they would go through that Red Sea, that they would see all of these incredible miracles, water from a rock, and
manna from the sky too,
yeah,
right?
and then they're like, you know what? We don't know where Moses went, so let's just do the whole calf thing, because that's worked out really well for us. You know, and it's, you know, and obviously they grumbled, they want to go back to Egypt, and that's, you know, and that's a very hard lesson, because we do that too, right? You know, they may not have, you know, gone back to Egypt, but they went to Egypt in their heart. Like, they longed after the good old days, which were not good. Clearly, they were in slavery and they were, you know, killing their children. But hey, you know, good old days. And so, but we do that too. You know, I think sometimes we long to go back to sin, kind of making it in our head to think, oh, the good old days. You
Well,
know,
it's easier. It's easier to stay in sin than it is to be obedient to God. And I think that's what they got tired of it. They got tired of wandering. They got tired of, you know, what was going on. It was like, are we ever, like what you hear in the car if you have children, are we there yet? You know, kind of scenario. I mean, it's 40 years of wandering.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think they lost faith not just in God. I mean, obviously they lost faith in Moses as their leader, and like, you know, this guy can't, you know, he won't pull over for directions, you know, and they lost their faith.
Yeah.
They lost their faith. And and I think all of us have probably at some point in our lives been guilty of that as well, where it's like, oh, I know myself, like if you're on I well know when you're on a diet, when you're trying to eat better. I don't like even the word diet, but even if you're just trying to eat better, be healthier, and, you know, not eat the M&Ms that are sitting on the table over here.
Literally right there.
That Paul is tempting us with over there.
I feel like they're calling me, but yes. It hardly comes up.
And it's easy. Sometimes it's just easier just to be like, you know, just forget it. I'm just going to eat what I want and we'll just deal with it. And that's usually not the best course of action, according to your doctor. And we know better. We know better. And you feel better. I mean, that's the thing, is that usually you feel better after a time, but we're impatient as humans. We want it now, and we don't want to have to wait.
It's true. So I don't know if you have any scenarios in your life. Feel free to throw that in the comments there. But I think eating healthy is kind of one of those things. And definitely, I mean, Stephen is pointing out the fact that the sweet Jewish nation went on their own path over and over and over. And then here at the end in 43, it says, I mean, he's even just kind of saying, he's like, so then I'm going to send you to Babylon. So, you know, it's like, yeah, you're going to get to go the land of milk and honey. You're going to get to go to Canaan, but that's not even going to last forever, because you're going to turn your back on me yet again. And so, yes, the point of this is not lost on me. Hopefully it's not lost on you. And that is that we have a pattern going on as human beings. And so, yeah, we have a pattern going on. Good for us. Not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
Alrighty, we're going to pick back up in verse 44 of Acts 7. Our ancestors carried the tabernacle with them through the wilderness. It was constructed in exact accordance with the plan shown to Moses by God. Years later, when Joshua led the battle against the Gentile nations that God drove out of this land, the tabernacle was taken with them into their new territory, and it was used there until the time of King David. David found favor with God and asked for the privilege of building a permanent temple for the God of Jacob, but it was Solomon who actually built it. However, the Most High doesn't live in temples made by human hands. As the prophet says, "Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Could you ever build me a temple as good as that?" asks the Lord. "Could you build a dwelling place for me? Didn't I make everything in heaven and earth? You stubborn people, you are heathen at heart and deaf to the truth. Must you forever resist the Holy Spirit? But your ancestors did, and so do you. Name one prophet your ancestors didn't persecute. They even killed the ones who predicted the coming of the righteous one, the Messiah, whom you betrayed and murdered. You deliberately disobeyed God's laws, though you received it from the hands of angels. Ooh.
So maybe it
Ouch.
was like lulling them into complacency there in the beginning
And then
by telling them, he's like,
put in that zinger.
sucker punch. And but absolutely true, clearly. And I have I know in my commentary, it talks about like all of the prophets. There are lots of, Uriah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Zechariah, Amos, and let's see, Jehoiada, I don't even know. Anyway, and Elijah, and so it's the list is extensive of prophets that were killed, even though they did amazing things and spoke on behalf of God. They killed them anyway, right? They didn't like what he said on Wednesday. And, it doesn't really matter what he did in the past. Let's get him out of here. He's bugging me. And so he is now going to say that. I don't know if Stephen knew what was going to happen, but clearly God is helping him with these words. And so he said, you betrayed and you murdered all of these prophets, even ones that announce the coming of the righteous one. You received the law ordained by angels, again, angels delivery, a service there for the law, yet did not keep it. You did not keep it. So he's accusing them.
I just don't know how did they come to terms in their mind when they're plotting to murder these people, how they got it in their head that it was okay. I mean, they're supposed to be the ones that are the keeper of the Mosaic laws, right? The first 10, because they had like 600 and however many of them. The first 10 were God-given, and it
quite
clearly says, do not murder. Yeah. So how did they reconcile murdering these people?
Yeah,
I don't know. I just try to, because I like to sometimes, put myself in their place. How could I think this or think that, or trying to see it from their perspective, because we know what happens in the end and that Jesus is the Messiah and all of this. At that point, they couldn't see. They didn't see it. They didn't want to see it. But I don't understand how they could. What possible point could they have to say, oh, it was okay?
It's true.
I don't know. I mean, what is it that they thought they were saving the people, that they were saving the Jews from a false prophet? Is that how they reconciled it? I don't know. Possibly. But even then, you shouldn't murder.
Yeah, I mean, I think, maybe it's a different age and time where life was a little bit less valuable. But, power is a big deal. And so if you have somebody who is going to interfere with your power or interfere with your plan, you could probably even justify it and say, I'm saving the Jewish people from this crazy man who is, who's definitely not following, the Mosaic law.
I think that's how they probably could have justified it to the people. But I'm thinking, when you're laying your head down, you're by yourself, I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you go to God? How do you go to God and justify that? Because they were the religious leaders, I don't know.
Well,
it just boggles my mind.
Not everybody.
Not
even
everybody
religious leaders.
Yeah.
Even religious leaders. Not everybody knows right from wrong, right? I mean,
I
not
guess.
everybody is obedient,
Right.
and if you tell yourself that this is better for the people,
You believe your own lie, I guess.
you
Yeah.
believe your own lie, and to be honest, I imagine this probably happens more than we know.
Yeah.
Maybe I've watched too many spy movies, but it's like they do things for the good of the world or the good of the people, and and they do bad things to save maybe many other people's lives, and yet it's still not right to murder. And so
No.
it's I don't know. They probably slept fine. This probably wasn't the first time that they did this. And as people with with high power, they probably got rid of a lot of people who were just in their way. Because they kind of controlled the court. So if they would like to get rid of somebody, they just like Stephen, they just find somebody to level false accusations.
Right.
Because even the guys at the end of chapter 6, the guys who are lying on Stephen and accusing him, right? They were supposed to be Christian leaders. So, they just got it in their mind that Stephen wasn't good or this or that, and the devil just allowed that those thoughts to just flow into false accusations, which leads right here to to the Pharisees or the Sanhedrin here being right on top of Stephen and asking him, so what do you have to say for yourself? But he is almost done here. He is almost done with his story. So you can see where we're headed.
All right, we will pick back up in verse 54 of Acts 7. The Jewish leaders were infuriated by Stephen's accusation, and they shook their fists in rage. Duh. I knew that was going to, you could almost tell that was going to be the reaction.
Yes, they're mad.
But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, gazed steadily upward into heaven and saw the glory of God. And he saw Jesus standing in the place of honor at God's right hand. And he told them, "Look, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing in the place of honor at God's right hand." Then they put their hands over their ears, and drowning out his voice with their shouts, they rushed at him. They dragged him out of the city and began to stone him. The official witnesses took off their coats and laid them at the feet of a young man named Saul. And as they stoned him, Stephen prayed, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." And he fell to his knees, shouting, "Lord, don't charge them with this sin." And with that, he died.
So but he definitely said what he wanted to say, right? All the way up until there, especially verse 51 and 52 and 53. He laid it out, and he had made his point that the people of Israel just kept pushing God away and just doing things on their own. And then he basically there at the end, 51 through 53, he leveled that accusation to them personally. And that did not go well. What does John say? I think
they allowed the devil to rule them instead of God, the same way we do today, listening to the wrong spirit.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The Holy Spirit is calling us. He's instructing us. He's here with us. But we know that temptation is always waiting as well and telling us, you deserve to do what you want. You know what? Your feelings are valid and important, and don't worry about what God thinks. God will just line up with whatever you're feeling today.
Yeah,
and
it doesn't work that way.
No, and I think we have this tendency. We're very ethnocentric. We always want to put ourselves in the center of the universe.
Yeah.
We literally want this world to rotate around us, and it's not just children. I mean, children definitely have that viewpoint. They can't often see like how their actions might affect others, and this is like a normal stage of progression through, through infants to toddlers to children. They, they're very focused on themselves, but at some point we have to grow up, and we have to realize that our actions affect other people. We have to be responsible for what we say and responsible for what we do. And they want to just keep acting like babies. And yes.
Well, it's the whole sentiment, and I think this, I don't know what you would call it, but this propaganda or whatnot of do whatever makes you happy, I think is where why we see what we see now, is we put what we want and what our feelings are above everything else, and as long as it makes us happy, it's okay, instead of what makes God happy. That's what we should be asking ourselves. And I think our forefathers and even the generation before us, that's kind of what they lived by, is honoring God. That's what you did. Whatever you did in your life was to honor God. And somehow in I think our generation, it turned into doing whatever honors you to make you happy.
Yeah, because if you're happy, then your happiness is more important than anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, that's even a saying that people say to each other. Oh, do whatever makes you happy. And I'm like, what?
Like,
that whatever is very scary.
And very subjective. Like, I just want to, I want to kill somebody right now. Like,
that's going to make me happy.
Just do whatever makes you happy. Yeah, it's like, I don't think you actually want to tell me that, because I'm a human being and I'm not perfect, and neither are any of us. And sometimes the desires of our heart are not that great. We need to align them with God's morality, God's character. We need to align ourselves, this vertical alignment. We need that. And then what we want will be a reflection of what God wants for us.
And I don't know if you've whenever I watch, like, say, World War II movies or that era, I just miss it. I just miss the spirit of people that they just seem to just honor God. I don't know. Do you get that when you watch those movies?
Yeah.
That's just the sentiment that comes across so often in those movies of honor and courage and those things that that honor God. And it just, I don't know.
And people weren't perfect.
No, by no means. By no means. There was still a lot of gross and ugly stuff going on in the world. I mean, if we're talking about World War II, look at what happened to the Jewish people. I mean, there you go.
At the hands of the Nazis. There's still
horrible.
Worldwide evil.
Horrible, but
yeah, it does feel like people just had a lot more integrity and patriotism
and just
faith, family and faith, and
God came first, and then God was first, and then family, and it just seems like we've lost that.
It's just very individual,
Yeah, we've just kind of lost it.
It's about me making me happy, and so and so these sweet religious rulers, they have the same disease that we have today, and that's the disease of sin. And and making ourselves the center of the universe rather than God the center of the universe. And so it doesn't surprise me that basically Stephen called them out and they
lost their minds.
And you've become very angry before as well when somebody has attacked you. I'm sure of it. I'm sure that is a human experience that probably 99.9% of the population can understand and relate to. However, they didn't just get mad. they, they took him to the outside of town.
Yep.
Something. Yep. And it says then they began stoning him. And so there doesn't seem to be a trial. There doesn't seem to be a sentence. It seems to all be very just like mob mentality driven. And
we've seen that recently too.
Absolutely. Riots, all that stuff. People just, we're not smart when we're in a mob mentality. We are like, good things don't happen when people are just reacting to how they feel, and they're beating up this person and burning up this police car. It's like, this is not what you want to have to tell your mother about what you did, because there is no mother that would be proud of that. So it definitely feels like a mob mentality situation. They pull him outside out of town, and then they just decide to start stoning him. So crazy, really crazy, really crazy.
And it's like, what if they stoned him without a trial? Isn't that against their laws?
I don't know.
Just saying.
These laws are kind of slippery sometimes,
I guess.
And so
do as I say, not as I do, kind of. Maybe.
Yeah, don't question authority. Just this guy's bad news, so we're just gonna get rid of him, and we'll make up a story later. You kind of feel like that's what's gonna happen, and I don't know. Maybe that's how they controlled it. They controlled information. I'm not sure.
You think? I mean, Stephen had to know if he accused them what was going to happen to him.
Yeah,
I would imagine that.
It was a great possibility, and
he still did it. He was obedient to God, and he still carried out the message that God intended him to carry out, regardless of what it was going to do to him.
Yeah, and he took a lot of time and effort. He took a lot of time and effort in laying out all that history, laying out all those patterns of the Jewish people being rebellious, and then turned it on them. And clearly they did not like that. But this story here, 55 and 56 is. I mean, I know that Stephen is the first, martyr that we know about in the Bible, and he will always have that title of distinction. But this is always very amazing too, is that he is like on his way, and so maybe somebody who has passed on recently, and this is what can happen. This can be their experience as well, right? He's gazing into heaven. God has opened up a window and said, hey, check out where you're going, check out the digs, right? And he saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And so, that I get it. God is a spirit, and so where's the right hand of God? But it's talking about that place of prominence. That's talking about what Jesus stands for. Literally, he is at the right hand of God. So, but then and then Stephen was kind of putting the nail in the coffin there in 56, and he's telling them. He's telling them what he sees. He sees, right? The heavens opened and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And in 57, once again,
they're acting like children.
They lost their mind and they're acting like babies.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they
covering their ears and shouting so that they couldn't hear what Stephen was saying.
Good for you. La, 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 la. Yeah. Good for you. So, and obviously that's that was it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, the stone that literally started it all. And so it's awful. And I think when I've read this story in the past, I'm just like, how is this a good story for the Bible? Like, like, gosh, I don't want to hear about, how awful
Mm-hmm.
Jesus's chosen people are treated. Like, that's not very encouraging to me, Lord. But it is very encouraging that, that he stood his ground, that he stood his faith, and then that he described what he saw. Like, he knows where he's going, and he took the time to say it out loud. And even though, that made them crazy, he said it out loud. What does John say?
That's why we need to know the Word of God, so we will
Stick
to the truth regardless of the outcome.
It's true. It's true. And even these hard stories, they strengthen our faith, and they, what are you learning from this story, is kind of the point. What are you getting out of chapter 7? How is it, that you would live your life different after reading chapter 7? Because there's some things to learn, and there's some reasons that your whole life could be changed. And so, yeah, I'm not saying you have to, be martyred. I'm not saying that that you necessarily have to stand up to the government and tell them how awful they are. But, but speaking truth is definitely what Stephen did. And so I am saying that you should not sugarcoat the truth. I don't think that that's our place.
Nope. And
Not
then, I mean,
us.
how loving is it of Stephen to ask basically for forgiveness for those that are stoning him? How
Crazy good.
how amazing is that?
Yeah.
And I mean, in the commentary here, it asks the question, how would you react if someone hurt you because of what you believed? And they're just saying, like, hurt you. They're killing him. They're stoning him to death. They're throwing rocks at him to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying, God, don't take it out on them. Don't put this sin onto them.
Yeah. And it's kind of what Jesus said, when Jesus was on the cross, like, forgive them. They know not what they do. And he's saying that as well. But, and Lord, receive my spirit. And so it's just, beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. But it's also great that, that Stephen was ready to, he was ready to suffer. I'm not saying that you have to be super excited about being stoned to death. But, like, look how strong his faith is.
Right.
He was ready to not just roll over. He was ready to say, you guys were actually the ones, who crucified the Savior of the world. And they didn't like that, but I wouldn't like that either if you told me that. But Jesus did die for my sin, and he had to make a plan for my sin, because I had no plan, and I couldn't work my way into heaven. If I tried with all my might. I could not work my way in. So Jesus had to be the atonement for my sin. And I don't like that. I don't like that he had to die for me, right? I don't like that Stephen had to die to be a martyr as well. But God has a great plan, and Stephen went, right? He went willingly to his death. But know that this stuff's going to get out. Like, you can't keep this story quiet. This one is going to go far and wide. And so there we go. And it's also kind of funny that we get to see in verse 58 the robes at the feet of a young man named Saul, who will come up again. Spoiler alert. He will come up again. His name will be Paul. He'll be on a couple missionary journeys, but yes, the young man who held the coats at Stephen's stoning was none other than the man who will write a third of the New Testament. So pretty amazing that God can use
anybody.
So yeah. So So that is it. It is time for us to close up, and we're just so grateful that you came. Thanks for saying hi. Thanks for commenting. We're going to be in Acts chapter 8 next week, which I think is shorter. Only 40 verses. There you go. And we're gonna see the progression or what kind of comes out of Stephen's martyrdom. So go ahead and read ahead if you want, but don't miss it because this is really great stuff.